please welcome to the stage Linda de Voogd.
Hi everyone. Can I have one more round of applause for all the performance before me? I'm also very glad with the stage because I thought you probably won't see me. I was told this is a safe space. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. I'm going to tell you an embarrassing story of me ending up at an ER. Anybody has a story of ending up at an ER once? Yeah? Yeah, so I was at work in the office and I had to do some paperwork and I had to staple two papers together and it turned out that the stapler was empty. So I refill it and as I click back the stapler, I accidentally staple my finger. I freak out. I instantly turn walking that pale, fall on the ground, my colleagues take a step back, nobody dares to touch me as if I'm contagious. So they decide to drive me to the ER. So everything I know about the ER, I know from television. So I expected at least 8 doctors coming in with the bed. Someone would shout, "Clear!" Nothing like that. I had to register. I had to walk to the waiting room by myself. And as I'm waiting, it took forever. So my mind goes crazy. I'm thinking, what if I could never use my hand again? What if I have to amputate my hand? What if I get one of those robot hands or a hook? You know, I can't present scientific posters with a hook. Okay, maybe it's convenient for pointing, but it's also going to be distracting, right? So it took forever, and after a while, finally the doctor comes in. He opens the curtain, he looks at me, he looks at my finger. He looks at me, he looks at my finger, he reaches over, bloop, flicks off the staple. It turns out to be barely touching my finger. That day I learned a very important lesson, and that anxiety can be so bad, you can end up at an ER because of it. Thank you. Thank you. One person. Yes. So I'm a neuroscientist and I study anxiety. And this is a very important topic because we all know what anxiety is. We all experience anxiety, unless you're a psychopath, maybe. But on top of that, we also have a 30% lifetime prevalence of developing an anxiety-related disorder. And this is the highest among all psychiatric disorders. So of course, this story was just illustrative and didn't happen last year. No, anxiety can be really, really bad. So anxiety can be so bad that you at spontaneous moments can have involuntary intrusions or memories of empty staplers. Anxiety can be so bad that you start avoiding places like work because it's filled with staplers. Or anxiety can be so bad that it can generalize to other things like paper clips. When I started my PhD and studied anxiety, I didn't realize one thing, and that is if you want to study anxiety, you first have to make someone anxious. And don't worry, I'm not stapling my subjects. I'm only threatening them. During any time during this experiment, you can receive an electrical shock. The longer it takes, the stronger it will be. It turns out that threat is actually, you don't even have to hurt anyone. You can just threaten. It's perfect to induce anxiety. It's a skill that politicians know very well, and I think all of our moms. Something I also learned about myself doing a PhD on anxiety, and that is that I have an inner medieval torturer. And I don't know if you've ever observed someone, it's a bit like when someone walks into a glass door because they don't notice there's a door. Of course you have an empathy response, right? But it also feels good. Oh my God. To see someone's pupil increase when they're anxious, God. At a bare minimum, I'm happy it's not me. I mean, I end up at an ER because I have a staple lying on my finger. I'm sorry, I will never participate in an experiment where I get electrical shocks. I'm going to say it, it's a safe space. I will never voluntarily sign up for my own research. I'm just not going to do it. I'm happily paying other people. If you want to participate, fine by me, I'm just not going to do it. So if you expected at this conference to only meet powerful, strong women, I'm not going to be one of them. I'm sorry. The expectations are way too high. Which is also whenever I introduce myself and somebody asks me, like, what is it you do? And I say, I'm a neuroscientist. The expectations of what it is a neuroscientist does. First of all, neuroscience is not brain surgery. Yeah, that's basically it. No, what I do is I do experiments on humans, and I get this a lot. I do experiments on humans, and I scare them, and I have this accent, but I'm not German. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Germans nowadays. Some of my best friends are German, but I'm Dutch. I'm just not one of them. So I just wanted to clarify. No, what I do on a day-to-day basis, I do experiments, right? Which means that somebody else is doing the experiment and I'm waiting in the other room. And that can be pretty boring, I have to say. Waiting. Neuroscience can be pretty boring. So when I do an experiment in the MRI, with MRI research, neuroimaging, then at least the wall, I'm staring at a wall, but there the wall has a red button. And I understand that when there is an emergency and a button needs to be pressed, it should be visible, not hidden somewhere in camouflage. But I'm also saying it is not a good idea to put a bored scientist in a room with a red button. Because we are curious by nature and gain new information through experimentation. So there's this one particular day, I'm running a study and there's someone in the MRI and he's in the control group, which is even more boring. I mean, I can't even scare him, right? So I'm trying to press the red button and my eyes fall on pieces of tubes with saliva, because we measure how anxious people are, for example, by measuring how much cortisol is there in their saliva. I don't like saliva. It's a bit gross. Right? And also, it sounds always very fancy, but what it means in practice is that I have to put on a latex glove, put a piece of cotton in somebody's mouth, wait for it to be drenched in saliva, put it in a tube, put it in a box, send it to Germany for analysis. That's really all I do. So I'm just saying, lower your expectations a little bit, okay? So, me and my colleague decide to have a 10-minute discussion of how gross saliva actually is. And especially this guy's saliva, because of course we give you instructions not to eat, but this guy didn't do it, so there are pieces of breadcrumbs in there. It's just gross. And we talk about how he has a funny color combination of clothes and a weird haircut, and why does he go to bed so late, and you know, we are super bored. Then the alarm goes off and I have to get back in for another measurement. So I put in the piece of cotton in his mouth and I measure his heart rate. And his heart rate is skyrocket. And I'm confused, because he's in the control group. His heart rate should be so low that I should be wondering if he's still alive. Yet this is the highest I've ever measured in the entire experiment, so I'm confused. So a few weeks ago I started a fitness class and they gave me one of these heart rate monitors, and then they put up your heart rate on a screen. Did you ever have that? And then you see it, like if it's green it's okay, and orange it's higher, and red when it's really high, right? If this guy's heart rate would be attached to the monitor, it would be blinking. Alarm bells would go off. Everyone would gather around like, hey, are you okay, Linda? Maybe you want to sit down, you want to sip water? No? I'm the only one out of shape? So I'm confused. So I ask him, hey, how is it going? And he says, it's not so nice, you know? And I'm like, well, what? He says, well, it's not so nice that you talk about my saliva. Now my heart rate goes up. And it turns out that the researcher before me pushed the microphone button, left it on, and of course the button of the microphone is not red. It's not visible, it's somewhere hidden. I didn't even know there was a button. It turns out he heard the entire conversation. I felt so embarrassed. But at the same time, I also felt a little bit of relief because in the instant I realized it, all the conversation I had about my participants in the last 4 years passed by and I dodged that bullet, to be honest. I could have said so much worse. So I learned another important lesson during my PhD, and that is I should not talk about my participants behind their backs before checking if the microphone is on. And I also think that we all scientists together should work to lower other people's expectations of what it is a scientist does all day. Thank you very much.
NYU's Linda DeVoogd, everybody!